Welcome to the Earth Your Wild podcast. We're your hosts, Jack and Ellie.
This is the podcast where we talk to industry experts and sustainable business owners to try to answer the question, how do I make my business more sustainable? So today we're joined by Thomas Panton. Thomas is CEO and sustainability expert at Canopey, the home of better buying. Thomas has worked in the sustainability sector for over a decade for organisations such as Greenpeace and Surfers Against Sewage. He is a previous startup founder and has recently completed an MSc in climate change and international development. Thanks for joining us today, Thomas.
Thank you for having me.
Have you.
Nice intro.
Impressive intro.
Appreciate that. You've done your research.
I have.
I did do a bit of research on you, and I feel like your backstory is super interesting. So I know you've probably been through this a million times, but I wondered if maybe you could kind of give us that summary of kind of how you got to where you are and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. And of course, thanks for having me again. Really appreciate it. And nice to see you both. Yeah, I'll give you the whistle-stop tour of it, because otherwise we'll be here all day. But actually, before I entered the climate space, I was an international swimmer. And I always say that was my first experience of being a founder, but just because the level of ambition, drive, the long hours, everything that goes alongside being that level of in sport comes into being a founder as well. So it was a really great experience doing that at quite a young age, and definitely prepared me for all the trials and tribulations which were to come following into my career. So when I quit swimming, and that was due to injury, I felt a little bit loss of purpose, to be honest. I've been surrounded by really great people doing great things, and I come from a family that are very green-minded and very environmentally aware, but it had never really been my focus. My focus had always been to swim, right? So suddenly I was sort of like lost as to what to do. All my friends had gone to uni. I was taking a year after secondary school working as a tailor in Levi's, and that very much opened my eyes firstly into sort of the fast fashion industry first and foremost, but also just like beginning to understand sort of the nature of sort of retail and consumerism and ethical consumers as well. People coming in talking about their jeans from 50 years ago that they used to be able to stand up in the bath or whatever, and now Levi's jeans were just like very, very elastic. So it was very enlightening and eye-opening, but decided that I fundamentally needed to go to uni and sort of like work out what I was going to do, find that purpose again. So I went to university, and I met someone who was working for Greenpeace, as you mentioned, and just instantly, like as soon as talking to her about the work that they were doing, I knew of Greenpeace already. I was studying politics and international relations in my undergrad, so obviously they were coming into that world as well of academia. But yeah, speaking to someone who was actually working within the organization was again a very sort of like inspiring conversation, and really I feel like that was sort of the trigger point for everything that I've done afterwards. I worked with Greenpeace for just over half a decade, first half of my career, and I did everything. So it sort of like started as a foot soldier fundraiser, which is, I would say, the hardest job, because you need to know everything about all the campaigns, and you need to be able to give answers when people challenge you and question you. Again, very helpful when you then become a founder and fundraise, because it's the same experience. But then moved my way up into events and was working sort of like in outreach and obviously sort of like a bit more detailed campaigns. And what I found was that the work that we were doing was absolutely super important, really, really powerful. And we were making these huge changes, campaigning against the biggest governments, biggest companies of the world. But also the biggest companies and the biggest governments of the world take forever to change. and there's some understandable reasoning behind that, like huge supply chains, lots to change. But a lot of the time it's not very justified. A lot of the time it's just pushback for no reason. And I found that very, very frustrating, having come from being this sort of like highly driven, super ambitious like sports person who was just like consistently sort of training and improving and racing and all of this stuff, to then having to like be super patient was quite challenging from an individual perspective. So as much as I very much still am an advocate, work, and I'm an activist for Greenpeace, I needed to go and do something which I felt was having quicker impact, even if it was smaller impact to begin with. So yeah, left Greenpeace, set up my first company a year and a half before the pandemic. And there's a reason I mentioned that, because it was in the events industry. I set up the first company in the UK to commercialize the extending of consumer product life at the end of these events. So paid by festivals to come in before the cleaning company, and then paid to sort of distribute that materials or products into remanufactured goods or recycling or whatever it was. So a really efficient model, and very lucky as a first-time single founder. But I mentioned that it was before the pandemic because we did our pilot year, and then every festival and the entire industry got absolutely decimated, including my company. So it was the sort of second largest thing that had happened. Obviously, I'd quit swimming, and now my first company had just like completely out of my control. And I felt very frustrated by that. But it was great, actually, because the silver lining was we'd been stood in this field of plastic waste, talking with thousands of people, and over my career had directly onboarded tens of thousands of people into the climate movement. And then we're also speaking to all these businesses that were trying to create really great products and solve this problem of waste, and like what we do with products at the end of that life and how these products are made, but they just weren't talking to each other. So the big sort of hairy, audacious goal was, well, why don't we build sort of Amazon, so for convenience, but you've verified impact, positive impact. And so the home for buying better, and Canopey being the first and only platform which completely streamlines the ethical consumer journey. And that's where we are today. So yeah, it's been a long but very, very rewarding journey so far.
Oh, it's cool. It's like the hero's journey.
I don't know.
Multiple setbacks.
I don't know if I can claim that yet. Let's wait until there's a success in there,
okay.
And then we can claim. At the moment, I'm still pushing. So
yeah, this time next year.
So with your work at Greenpeace, would you describe yourself as like a climate activist? Do you think?
I think that for Greenpeace, there is activism, but it's not in the type of activism which most people think of when they hear that word. So when most people talk about activism, they're talking about going in the street and stopping cars from driving, or going and I don't know, stopping trains from moving, or whatever it is. And that's well needed. Like, we need that collective action. But that's not really what Greenpeace does. Greenpeace's actions are much more targeted at businesses and governments. So they'll disrupt like government sort of meetings. They'll disrupt like business headquarters. They won't disrupt individuals, like the actual individual person's day-to-day life. Because as much as they need the awareness from individuals, they, through their sort of 50 years of being an organization, or 52 years of being an organization, have not had as much success when doing that as when they have been targeting the companies or governments that they say they're going to. So yes, there is activism within that. And yes, I guess when working for them and doing those non-violent direct actions, you could call myself an activist, but I actually prefer sort of climate advocates and climate worker. At the end of the day, 98% of the work that Greenpeace does, people don't see, which is in a boardroom, very boringly around a table with lots of execs and directors and people in those companies, bringing a roadmap of how they can transition to be greener. And that's the very first thing that they attempt to do. And then if that company then rejects that, then they take action. Then they tell the people what's going on. Then they bring sort of pressure onto those organizations. But then if that company then comes back and says, okay, stop the action, like, let's talk, then they're back in the boardroom and they're working with that company to try and get them to change efficiently, without loads of people having to lose their jobs, without the company going bust, without all of these things. So there's a lot of proactive action rather than just sort of action for the sake of action, which I think is a really important distinction.
Yeah, I feel like in recent years there's been a big kind of thing where business activism is starting to come out, and as businesses, we should be seen to kind of take a stand. So but what's your view on that? Do you think businesses should be standing up, or is it like you said, you should be more of an advocate, or because I find it's difficult, isn't it? I really admire the work of like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, but as an individual, I don't know if I could go out and actually sit on the road with them. But that doesn't mean I don't admire what they do.
Yeah.
But it's difficult, isn't it, from a business perspective?
Yeah, so there's lots of like challenges. So as an individual, the only thing that's sort of on the line is you and like your livelihood and whatever else. But actually, as a business and as a business representative, you have to think about everything that is around that: your shareholders, the business, the actual growth of that business, the positive impact that business could have if it grew without challenge. So all of those things have to be taken into account. But I think the thing that most people forget when they talk about sort of business versus political versus non-political action is that they are intrinsically linked. Like, businesses don't run without politics. Politics doesn't run without business. Society and people's day-to-day lives wouldn't run with either of those things either, and vice versa. Without the people, those things wouldn't be a thing. So I think that it's very easy for us to go, oh, business is separate from politics. Oh, business is separate from climate. Like, we should focus on business and let the climate activists and let the climate organizations deal with climate, let the governments deal with politics, and let businesses deal with business, and let people deal with lobbying. But that's not really what that's not a true representation of how that triangle works. Those things are: we are people in businesses and governments put regulation on businesses, businesses bring trade and commerce to the economy, which governments run and that people buy into. So it's impossible to tear those apart. I think that doesn't remove the fact that it's complicated, right, for businesses to get involved. I think that generally there are things where businesses probably, if there's no relation to what they do or the impact that they have, like, what's the benefit of them getting involved? However, there's a caveat within that, which is sort of moral obligation. There's a huge argument just in social science studies whether moral obligation exists, essentially, whether we should be morally obligated. So without going into the academic side of that, the point is that I fundamentally believe that we are morally obligated to speak when bad is happening. And if that directly affects us or not, it's relevant because it's affecting the society that we live within. And regardless of the borders and the different economies that we run within, we are all people. So climate is a really good example of that, because climate affects everybody, but some of us aren't going to be affected that much by it right now. And that doesn't mean, therefore, we shouldn't speak about it. So I think that leads to companies having to take some sort of a stance. I think sitting on the fence with like big topics like that probably isn't the best thing to do. There's going to be a right side of history and a wrong side of history, and I think it's always smart to do the right thing as early as possible, just from a moral perspective, but also from a PR perspective. And then I think the other thing that I would just say is that from Canopey's perspective, we actually have a policy on NVDA action, on non-violent direct action for our employees. So they are allowed to go and speak on company time at things that they feel are appropriate to speak upon. Obviously, if that is like fundamentally against Canopy, that's different. But then they can go into a trade union and they can speak to us as founders. But I think, like, what we're talking about are big political issues. They have the right to go and get involved, and Canopy fully supports their freedom to do that, and to do that like legally. So yeah, we take a very different stance from most companies, where we encourage people to get involved. We encourage people to talk. We encourage people to speak out. A good example of that is I'm very vocal about a lot of different political things, whether it's climate, whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's whatever it is, I'll speak out about it. And that's because I've worked for a human rights organization, but I'm also a business owner, but I'm also just a person who feels morally obligated to speak about these things. And my company, albeit I'm not speaking on behalf of the company when I speak about those things, my company accepts that I have the right to do those things as an individual. So yeah, I think not every company needs to take that stance, but that's where we sit.
I think it's I think it's really important for what you guys do, though, because I guess that education piece, kind of raising awareness, is so important. And Yeah, I guess you must have sort of taken that from Greenpeace and then sort of designed Canopey quite strategically. You kind of thought, okay, we need to educate people, we need to raise awareness, we need to verify green claims, and we need to make it easy for them to buy from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, like just coming back to the root of like what Canopey is, you know, the ethical consumer market is super fragmented. We all know that we need to buy better, but over half the population find it so complicated that they don't even bother trying to do it. And that's a huge problem, because if we're going to decarbonize or de-impact every industry, every sector, that means we really need to remove those barriers and streamline that user journey. Otherwise, we just won't do it. And we can't afford not to do it. So like for Canopey, it's not so much about like, oh, let's like shop like really sustainably, here are some eco-friendly products. It's okay, what are the barriers that people experience and what do people enjoy and don't want to sacrifice? Well, people don't want to sacrifice convenience. We've spent our entire existence as humans innovating to give ourselves convenience. If the climate movement then says, forget it, you've got to sacrifice that in order to be sustainable, people aren't going to do it.
It's not going to happen.
And we've seen that. We've just seen it time and time again. A niche will, a small group of people will. They'll sacrifice everything for the climate, and good on them. Like, you know, I think it's incredibly honorable, and I think it's incredibly worthwhile. But they don't have a right to judge the people who won't, because those people have lived through that and have other things going on. And so for Canopey, it's all about, well, how do we take it out of that niche and give it to the rest of the people? And fundamentally, that means building convenience and trust into sustainability. So you're not sacrificing anything. If anything, you're getting more out of it. You're still getting the convenience, but you're also trusting something, and you're also seeing the positive impact that you get. So for Canopey, it's about bringing lots of different fragmented parts of the ethical consumer market into one platform. So whether you want to verify green claims, learn about swaps you can make, track your impact, or even buy a product, currently you have to go to lots of different platforms. On Canopey, we bring that into one. So we are verifying green claims with primary evidence in line with the Green Claims Code. We are the only marketplace to do that. And then you can learn and shop on platforms. So you don't lose the convenience of having to go lots of different places. So you can just still stay in one place and do all of that with the trust that we've given, because we've done the work for you. But then fundamentally, there's an extra incentive there, because as you shop, you see the positive impact that you're having. So the carbon emissions, the water waste, and the plastic waste that you're saving as a consumer every time you make a purchase, which then you get rewarded for every time you hit a milestone. You know, it's about really making as much incentive to make that purchase as possible, because fundamentally, to be an ethical consumer, or to convert someone to be an ethical consumer, takes more incentive than not. So fundamentally, we try and build all of that into one platform with one user journey. So it's super easy. And it doesn't matter whether you're an eco warrior or an oil exec. You can shop for what you want, when you want, and how you want. But if you do it on Canopey, you can trust, learn, shop, and track your impact without having to do anything else, which I think is really, really important.
And hopefully it's a better experience for them, better shopping experience.
Yeah. That's the idea, right?
So tell us about price then. Where does price come into that? Is it expensive to have a low impact product?
Yeah, that's what people think, isn't it?
So no, yeah, we hear it all the time, right? In the ethical consumer space and in this climate space, it's like, it's too expensive to be sustainable. And so a simple answer is no, it's not. But most people will go, yes, it is. I've seen the prices on your website. So let me give some reasoning to that no, which is, if you compare the price at purchase for an ethical product compared to a non-ethical product, there is a price difference fundamentally. Now, there's a slight increase in the amount people are willing to spend for green products. That's been proven again and again through the data, but it's often not as much as the actual price hike that you would need to pay to make that initial purchase. The problem is that it's completely unfair to judge an ethical product at purchase point with a non-ethical product at purchase point, because they're completely different life cycles. They're completely different. What you need to buy next is completely different. And also what you do at the end of life is completely different. So there are three things that we touch upon. The first is that this product will last you longer, generally. So therefore, you're replacing the amount of times that you need to buy that product again and again. So that already makes a difference from the life impact on your wallet. The second thing is that pretty much, all of the like things that you're buying again and again, so in your house, so cleaning, cosmetics, these sorts of products in the ethical market, which can be refilled and reused. So instead of having to buy that same product at point of purchase again and again, what you're doing is, if you're a non-ethical purchaser, then you're buying that same product again and again and again. It's always the same spray bottle. It's always the same, deodorant or whatever. But if it's an ethical product, you buy it at first point, but then you're buying refills from that point onwards. And those refills are cheaper than that mainstream product. So fundamentally, what we can show is that you save money the longer you have this product and the longer you buy these refills. You actually save money over that life cycle. A really good example of this is reusable water bottles. So if you buy a reusable water bottle, it'll probably cost you somewhere between 35 and 45 pounds nowadays, if you want a good one at least. And you can get cheaper ones, and good, like try to, but they probably won't last as long, or they're probably made from plastic or whatever. So, there's a payoff on price there. But let's say you buy a good quality, well-made water bottle, even at the highest point of that, 45 pounds. And then what you're replacing in the life cycle of that water bottle is about 1,500 approximately single-use plastic bottles over the life cycle of that entire reusable bottle. The reason I'm looking over here is because I've got a reusable bottle. And when so if we just compared the price of a reusable water bottle versus a single-use plastic bottle that you can get from the shop, of course, it's a huge price hike, right? Like, I totally get that. But the point is, then you need to go and buy 1,500 more of these to be able to get the same impact as buying one of these. So fundamentally, you're actually saving over £1,000 over the life cycle of that product, which is a huge, huge difference. For most people as well, like, what we try to encourage is, don't feel like you have to buy everything at once. These products are more expensive. Buy one of them over a quarter, or over every month, or whatever you can afford. And actually, now you're saving money for the rest of your purchasing life. So I think that, yes, that, if you just compare it price purchase point, of course there's a price hike. But no, it's not more expensive to be an ethical consumer, because once you've bought that product, it's cheaper to live with it. It's and that's an education piece, right? Because we don't talk about that. It's also a data piece. No one shows that. So what we're building into our calculator at the moment on the platform is that you'll be able to see the financial savings that you're having by buying this product and buying the refills.
I think that will be so effective, because it's so obvious, isn't it? Like, we know that, I know that, and yet even when I'm in that position and I'm like, oh, a bit expensive for a water bottle, I'm like, I don't really know if I want to do that. And yet when you say it, it's so obvious. So it's like getting that across to the consumer, and like. I do think as well that's really good advice, to just do things like gradually, because it does feel so overwhelming. Because when you're thinking, right, I've got to like get all these cleaning products, and I've got to change all my cosmetics, and I've got to do this and that, and you're just like, I don't have any money. I mean, we just switched to like reusable sponges in the office, didn't we? And we just wash them once, a couple of times a week, and it's just like. But it would be amazing to work out the cost price of just not having to buy sponges, just that tiny thing. But exactly. I haven't seen anyone actually show the financials, and unfortunately, like, at the moment, that's probably what people are more interested in.
Well, and understandably, right, it is a really challenging time across the world, but also in the UK, like, cost of living. I've just moved to London, and my basket for shopping every time I go to the shop has like doubled in the time that just from Norwich to London. So I totally get it. This is exactly why we're doing that. It's not there now, but it will be in the next couple of months. And we really want to make sure that it's not only an incentive environmentally, but as you say, like, coming just back to the root things that people are thinking about. If you can not everyone is going to be super interested in sustainability. That they'll you can ask anyone and they'll say, yes, I want to be a sustainable shopper, but will they do it? There's a huge intent to action gap, and understandably, because there are other things which are more important to them, and I get that. Like, we're human, we can't think about just one sole thing forever. So I think that every time something comes up in the world which knocks climate just like off its top spot of like things we think about, we need to make sure that we're also giving them a reason why actually that's all related to what we're doing. So whether that's cost of living, whether that's durability, whether that's slow living, whatever it is, we can tap into that with the products that we sell. I also think that just generally, like, we should consume less, and that's not always an easy conversation to have with people. And I think that there shouldn't be any judgment around people who push back against that. Look, I want to buy that. I totally get it. We're in a society which has conditioned us to think that. And actually, again, with ethical products, the beauty of them is that you can buy one and it will be really good quality for a long time. So actually, we are slowing down the consumer impact just from the amount that people are buying, just because these products are better and longer lasting. So there's lots of different touch points, and it is really important that people understand that it's not just about being sustainable. There's lots of other things.
I think this doesn't apply to all products, but one other thing that affects me a bit, but I see it more with other people, is like behavior change. Like, it's so easy for people to like think, I'll just buy a plastic water bottle because it's easy. I'll just throw it in the bin. Like, it's even just getting them to like recycle properly. And I think there is a thing like with refillable cleaning products, you've got to actively think, I've got to put my sponge in the washing machine or dishwasher. I've got to do that. Like, it's a behavior change. And I feel like that's probably harder. Sometimes people just pay for convenience, don't they? So how do you get people to do that?
I think that actually it's a really good point, and I actually think that's something that businesses. I am very wary of talking about. People need to get used to that, because I don't think that that's the smartest way to go about trying to like save the planet. I think actually that what we need to do is make products even more innovative in this space and make it so that the effort is minimized, but there's still positive impact. And I think that's why you see like great companies not always going to the most environmentally friendly they could go, right? Like, some people are using like powders for like shampoos and then mixing the water, and that's fantastic. Like, that's absolutely. But there are also like slightly less positive impact, but still more positive impact products which don't require you to do that. So it's definitely having that scale, but just making sure that it is better, at least. Because I think that, to strive for that perfect lifestyle where everything is non-water based and like we have to clean them and like the consumer has to take that, like, it's the wrong conversation. Like, really, we need to make it so that even if someone wants the same convenience, they can get that, but they can still get a more positive impact. Even if we reduce the consumer industry impact by 20%, that's a huge amount. And so I think that, we really fundamentally need to talk about like not trying to be perfect, and not everyone needs to be. There will be some people who want to strive for that, and good on them again. They're the same people probably who want to go out and campaign with Extinction Rebellion, and I'm all for it. I think that the majority of people don't want to sacrifice those things, and also just don't have the time. I come from quite a poor area of Oxfordshire, and the people I grew up with and the state school that I went to, their families don't have time to be thinking about like, all of these extra things to add into their day to be an ethical consumer. So how do you tackle that? Like, you can't give them more time unless we completely change the economic system, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. So fundamentally, we need to make what we're offering fit into the lifestyle that they already have. And then it makes it much easier to convert people who, don't have time, don't have knowledge, don't have money, to bring into that. One thing that I just wanted to touch on, which you mentioned earlier, that, the thing about making a small swap rather than just like everything all at once and not having the money to do it, is that it might feel like a small swap for you as for the individual. But if 65 million people in the UK did that one swap, that's a massive impact. Like, it's huge. And then if all of those people then continued to make that one swap every 3 months, 6 months, once a year, like, we're suddenly drastically changing the way that the consumer industry impacts the planet and people. So I think that it is quite easy to look at it just from an individual perspective, like, I can't have much of an impact, I'm just one person. But you've got to think, like, if every neighbor in your street did that same one swap, or if everyone in your city or whatever it is, that's slowly having a bigger impact, even if you've done actually just one thing. So it's about talking about those things. And one of the big things that we built in actually, which again you'll see in the next couple of months as we release more and more features, is the ability to share your impact that you're having as a consumer on Canopey. So obviously we're showing the carbon emissions, the water waste, the plastic waste that you're saving when you make these purchases. That all aggregates into your account as a Canopey account holder. So then the ability to be able to like take that and share that directly to your socials so that you can say, this is the positive impact I've had. And actually, I haven't made even that many swaps. I've just changed one thing and look at this. This is great. And then it encourages people in your community to also make that one swap. And then suddenly we're seeing quite a huge drastic change. And again, on Canopey, we're seeing the whole community impact as well. So we're able to show that side as well. So it's really positive. I just think that we need to change the way that the ethical consumer sector talks about it, because so far it's all been like eco-friendly, like be super eco, be perfect, like zero waste. Like, are you joking? Yeah. Like, what the heck does that mean? Like, are you human? There is going to be waste. I'm sorry. Like, it's insane to me that we still use these terms in our sector because they disenfranchise just like the entire population. So yeah, I definitely think it's about behavior change and the way we talk about these things.
Yeah, I think you're doing the right thing. I think you're basically taking the Amazon strategy of designing a much better, more elegant solution with less friction.
Not the A word.
And then everybody's going to use it because it's way better than the alternative. And I think
sounds like another company I know does. It sounds like possibly your company. No, exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think your website is amazing. I think it's great what you've done, and creating that community as well is incredible because, like you say, like when you feel like you're part of something and you can share what you're doing.
Nobody's going to be shouting about their last purchase on Amazon on social media.
Well, but I think it's changing, right? Because it always used to be like there's been this huge push over the last like 5 years of like Instagram Reels and then TikTok of like Amazon finds, like cool Amazon finds, like, and that's shifting. Like if you see it more and more on the comments on those posts, like, yeah, but why are you buying on Amazon? Yeah, but we do really need that product. Like, and it's really interesting because previously it would just be like, oh, cool, I'm going to buy that. Whereas now we're definitely seeing a shift. And even if it's just a few comments like on each post, that, you're bearing in mind that they're playing into an algorithm here where people are following them because they want to find those things. So even then, when you see a comment from someone calling that out, that's incredibly positive because that means there are far more people who think that way than we think. So I think that it's about changing that mindset. I also think it's just about tapping into what they want. What we want people to be doing is go, look at this Canopey find, look at what I found on Canopey, look at this great buy. Because also the beautiful thing about what we're doing and this sector that we work in is that these products look and feel nice, like they're well made. Like, a Wild Cosmetics deodorant looks sexy. It's like the iPhone of deodorants, which no one would ever think of saying. An Ocean bottle looks incredibly cool, and it's a water bottle. Like, these are the sorts of things we can really start to like get people to talk about is the sexiness of just these normal consumer products, which I think generally hasn't been done. And Apple is a great example of that, where they, not unethical necessarily, but just in the way that they've taken a phone, which is really just like a thing of that we use for a utility, but they've made it like this sexy product that everyone wants all the time. And obviously there's issues with that when it's not an ethical product because it encourages people to buy bad things. But if we can do that same model for products which are better, then I think that's really good. And I think there are companies, like Fairphone, for example, which is tapping into that same mindset, that consumer mindset, but knowing that by tapping into it, they're actually going to have a positive impact as well. There's too much pushback against like, oh, we shouldn't encourage people to buy. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if we don't encourage people to buy this stuff, then they're just going to buy the shit ones. Like, and we can't have that.
Yeah. I mean, there is that problem with consumerism, isn't it? Because like you're saying, like with Apple, people want the latest iPhone, whereas because that's what they want to talk about. Whereas like you want them to buy a water bottle and keep it for years. And then they can't talk about it. So what are they going to post about on Instagram?
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's why
we need to change that narrative, don't we? Of I don't know,
and just the longevity of those things. Like, keep talking about that product and how good it is. Like, I've had this product for 3 years, and look how good it still is. Like, that's something it can still be cool. It can still be sexy, but it doesn't have to be like brand new. And I think that we actually saw this like a huge cultural shift when Depop launched, and like not secondhand clothing was like thrifting maybe from like charity shops, but not really cool to do, right? Whereas like when Depop launched, and now obviously Vinted as well doing their thing, is like it's cool to show off your secondhand clothing. And you've got now like loaning, like on like Loanhood and like by rotation and all of these things where you're able to like actually feel cool in something which isn't new and really shout about it. And I think that's really, really important, because if you can get people to not feel like they're sacrificing convenience, not sacrificing social standing, not sacrificing sort of quality, not sacrificing taste or whatever it is, like then you're not asking them to do anything else other than sort of talk about just something different. And I think that's really, really a better way to go about it than to be like, sacrifice your convenience, sacrifice the quality, sacrifice all this stuff, and then tell me how good it is, because everyone's just going to go, absolutely not. No one's going to want to shout about that.
I think as well, I think that we all love like having a story to tell, so weaving a story around the product, and a purpose around it.
Yeah,
I think people love that. I think it's smart.
100%. Yeah, one of the things actually that all of our brands that sell through Canopey, they all have great stories. They all have like a great both backstory, but also like just like product development story, or the communities they work with, or the social work that they're doing as well outside of the business or like around the business. And one of the things we're really keen to do is build on that more. And I think that the reason for that is twofold, is that most marketplaces traditionally have been all about the marketplace. But we've shifted slightly to loyalty towards like the brands that you buy from, which has seen an increase in D2C, but still people want the convenience of marketplace. So if a marketplace can bring in the loud hailing and the storytelling of these individual brands within the marketplace, then you're not asking someone to sacrifice the convenience to be loyal to a brand. You're just asking them to do it on one platform where you can see the other brands as well, which they won't, they're not going to say no to. So it's a huge thing for us, and not just from a brand perspective, but also just from an individual perspective, like doing things which relate to the people who are interested in using Canopey, and also reaching people who aren't like yet. So we did a huge campaign outside H&M probably like a month ago now. Blimey, time just flies, doesn't it? And there were people who we were calling out H&M's Take Back clothing scheme, where it was found that over 75% of the clothes that they were having returned were actually ending up in landfill or in the incinerator. And we were standing outside H&M and we were doing this campaign. People who like never even like considered not buying from H&M were coming up asking, thanking us for informing them, taking a Canopey sort of leaflet or a photo of the Canopey stuff, and then going away. And then later that day, we'd see people coming into the Canopey site and like searching and using the codes that we'd given them at that day so that we could see where they were coming from. And it was really empowering, because you realize that most people just don't know. Most people just don't have the time to go and find out, and don't want to have to go and find out. They'd rather just remain ignorant to it. But if someone just like lays it in front of them, but then also gives them a solution at the same time, there's no reason to say no to that. And I think that the more we do that, the more that you talk about that, the more community you build around just like consumers, like rather than just brands, like people begin to talk to people. And that's fundamentally what it's all about, is like we're all people, we're all sort of buying, shopping, selling, whatever it is. And I think that that's really important, is that you always tap back into that root of what everything comes down to, which is the individual.
Yeah, it's shocking what these brands like H&M get away with, isn't it? And how people just...
Yeah, my guess is 75% were recycled because they fell apart by the time they got back to them.
it kind of annoys me that like they get away with that and people think, great, cheap clothes, I'm going to go and buy it. And look, oh yeah, and it's good for the planet apparently. And then you get people as well who call out the brands that are doing great things, because obviously nobody's perfect. And
yeah.
I know people that call out like Patagonia, and they've called out Tony's Chocolate Only. And I'm like, still, they're trying. They're so much better than these other guys.
Better.
Yeah, like they're so much better. And like in some ways it just feels like you can't win, can't it, when everyone's like, the B Corp movement gets pulled up all the time and people are like, oh no, we're not going to be a B Corp because blah blah blah. And it's like, well, you've got to still segregate the really bad ones from.
I find it really challenging just generally. Like, we have certifications and like frameworks, and then they end up not being perfect, and people go, oh, scrap that then. But also people within the climate movement call for it to be scrapped, and it's like, that's completely the wrong attitude, because these things are still better. They might not be as perfect as you thought they were, but they're still better than what is the alternative. And what we tend to do is go, it's actually dangerous for mainstream brands now to be taking a green stance, right? Because what used to happen was that mainstream brands wouldn't say anything. They'd just sell their shit. And people would just go, okay, well, I know it's bad, but like, I don't really care, because I like what it looks like and it's cheap, and I can get it really easily. And then ethical brands would be really shouting about all the good they're doing, but then people would be like, I see that you didn't do that. And it's like, well, you know, it's like flipping heck, like, you know, as you say, like, yeah, but I've done all this other stuff. What about that? And they're like, yeah, but that one thing. And actually, what's interesting now is that big brands are starting to jump on the bandwagon, and they're generally greenwashing, but sometimes they do a good thing. But the challenge is that by them doing that and talking about that good thing, is that now those same people who called out those ethical brands for the one thing, suddenly the big brands are also in that target. So what we're going to see over a bit of time, and it will definitely take a shift, because people will still turn a blind eye to a lot of these things for a long time. But over time, what we'll start to see is that brands need to be talking about their green credentials, but they also need to accept that they're not perfect, and transparency is going to be absolutely key to all of this. And fundamentally, what that means is that big brands that need to therefore be transparent, but also talk about their green stuff, suddenly that transparency is going to sort of be their downfall unless they change. And they can't get away from the transparency, because regulation's coming in to force them to be transparent. So it's really interesting times to watch that shift happening, and also really interesting times to watch regulation come on what can be said by a company, and how can they say that, what claims can they make, because I think that will ultimately trip up quite a lot of the big companies. But as I say, probably not right now. Like, I think it will be a bit of a transition period. I also think that it will happen quicker if we collectively in this industry, just going back to what we were talking about before, is like change how we talk about things, make it easier for people to do these things, but also don't just talk about the problem, but talk about the story and the solution right in front of that as well, because then it doesn't feel like these people are like, oh, I feel really bad, but I've got nowhere to go. They're like, oh, I feel really bad, and actually I heard about this great company which lets me do this in a better way, and that's going to be the real kicker in this movement, that's going to change things, I think.
Yeah. Would you advise businesses to get various accreditations? Because I know that Canopey, you've got loads, which, you know, I think is great personally. You've got you're part of 1% for the Planet, you're pending B Corp, ESG mark, you've got a super green website, which is obviously really important. You know, do you despite the backlash, do you still think that that's important? Because we've obviously got to start somewhere, haven't we?
I think yes. I think what's really interesting is that a lot of companies have these things as well, but they just don't really know, and they don't know what talking about. Like most companies are living wage employers, right? And they don't know that they're living wage employers. And actually, to talk about that is really important, because then you're talking about something really positive. I think that, again, though, it comes with transparency. Like, we also go on and write blogs about the fact that as we grow, we're going to have a bigger impact because we're doing more transactions and more products are being sold. So yes, whilst that's reducing the impact of the current consumer industry, it's not removing the impact. It's just there's still going to be impact. And we talk about that, and we talk about how we're going to tackle that. And yes, that probably includes offsetting, and yes, that probably includes carbon removal. And it's like, okay, but how do we justify that, and how are we accrediting it? So I think, again, it's come back to transparency, and it comes back to making sure that you're clear about these things. I also don't think there's a harm in being like, we're shit in these areas, but we want to improve them, and we'd love some support around that. And then people can send you stuff and talk to you about it without you needing to be the expert, because, you know, you shouldn't have to be the expert to do these things. I think that frameworks are really important. Certifications are less important, but I think can be helpful in the ethical consumer market. Most people who are shopping want to trust something which has a reputation rather than sort of just the word of a company. And again, actually, with the Green Claims Code, you kind of need evidence now behind what you're claiming as well. So it helps to have been certified. Just not every company can afford to do those things, though, like for every certification under the moon. So, like, for example, B Corp is quite expensive for small companies to do, less so for big companies, in my opinion. But the framework of B Corp is completely free to use, and you can use it and then look at the things that you could be improving. And then that gives you a really good roadmap to then go, we've used the B Corp framework, we can't afford B Corp certification right now, but here's where we stand, and here's our sort of like current situation. Here are the things we need to improve upon. And it doesn't take a huge amount of time for small companies to do that. Like, you know, you just need someone who's committing a bit of time to that over like a month to basically go through all of those different sections. And you could probably do it quicker if you just put them on it full time. And then whether you then go and get certified is completely a price question. But so long as you're talking about where you are and how you've measured that, then I think that's fine. Yeah, I think the biggest thing to be careful of is talking about things which you don't have evidence for. Like, we have some really great brands which are like, oh, my product's vegan. And I'm like, technically, like, yeah, sure. Like, you're not using any animal ingredients, but vegan is a bit more than that. The vegan certification looks at more than just sort of the materials that you use. It looks like how those materials are sourced and various things. Same with cruelty free. Like, okay, you could be using like bamboo, and that technically, you know, the product is not like animal product, so therefore it hasn't been tested on animals. But if that bamboo has come from cut down land of pandas or whatever, like, then it's not cruelty free, like you've damaged habitat. So it's really important that these sort of claims are clearer for people, and then if they're going to claim those things, that they have evidence of that actually having been certified or audited in some way, which is challenging. So what I tend to do again is just encourage people to talk about why this product is better generally, and then why you haven't got a certification for something, but you have done all of these various things to make sure that, you know, it's as ethical as it can be. But again, the challenge is that, you know, if it's not perfect, people will call you out on it. So I think, yeah, transparency is key.
What is happening with government legislation on verification? Is that, like, do you have much knowledge of what's going on there, or?
Yeah, so in 2021, the Competition and Markets Authority brought out the Green Claims Code that essentially restricted people on what they can say with or without evidence and how they talk about things, and it sort of restricted certain claims from being used. A good example of that is like, to say something is biodegradable is misleading, and actually you need to talk about whether it's home compostable or industrially compostable, because biodegradable could mean either of those things or just one of them, and that's a problem. Because if you're telling someone it's biodegradable, I would think, oh, I can just chuck that into my compost then. But actually, a lot of the time, it's just industrially compostable, so very different. So yeah, the change in sort of like splitting things up so people are a bit clearer of what to do with them. And that will hopefully lead to a change in people making mistakes with recycling, composting, landfill, whatever it is. Then the EU followed up a year later with the EU Green Claims Directive, and it basically was just like a slightly more comprehensive version of the Green Claims Code. I think the EU basically were like, oh, well, the UK beat us to it. Damn, we better get something out, which was quite rare for the EU. And quite rare for the UK to be leading on something like that. So that was really good to see. I think that both of these things are generally targeted at bigger companies. Like, so HSBC has been like called out and fined. Amazon has been called out and fined. You know, so for small companies, there's less immediate threat, but that certainly doesn't mean that they're not going to be breaking regulation if they go against it. They will be. They just might be able to get away with it for a bit longer. I'm not encouraging them to do that. I think that regulation will develop. I think that they'll learn from like what has been effective, what hasn't been effective. Most big companies just budget in fines into their marketing budget. So they'll just go, okay, let's put this campaign out. We know we're going to get fined from the, the ASA, and then it's like that's just budgeted in, and they can afford it. And they're going to get a fine from the Competition and Markets Authority. It's like, okay, well, we can afford that because we know that we're going to get X amount more purchases. So I think that there will be a shift in how it's policed a little bit more. But generally, the regulation has been pretty comprehensive and it's quite clear. Like you can just literally search like UK Green Claims Code, and there's a really good guide on just like what you can and can't say, and how you can say things. So really encourage people to do that. I think that outside of the sort of European geography, there's not as much happening. Australia also released something quite similar, but the US hasn't really caught on super hard, and and Asia is sort of like, it's a bit strange in Asia because there's this huge demand for ethical consumerism, but not much like business support like in pushing it. Not business support as in like they're all doing great things, but like in terms of ethical consumer products, like they're there, but it's not really like a huge market, even though there's a huge demand. Very weird and really good for Canopey if we can expand that. But no, the point is that I think that now that countries have started releasing that regulation and we're learning from it, and then other countries will learn from that as well and then implement their version of that, we'll start to see that quite quick now. But waiting for that policy to come in was like waiting for paint to dry. Honestly, it took so long, and I've seen people working on that campaign for well over a decade. So yeah, so it's been long needed, but we're finally seeing regulation catch up.
Interesting. So our final kind of question, so we can see how positive your mindset is. But we normally like to ask people where do you think the world will be in 10 years, in another decade, but also B, where would you like it to be?
Okay. I actually hate it when people ask me this question, mainly because it's not a representation of you guys at all, but mainly because I've studied the climate science. And I'm also trying to be a positive representative of the climate movement. So they're both very conflicting things. I think realistically that I'll start with the negative side, give a bit of positivity, and then what I'd like to see happen. I think that the global climate situation will be exponentially worse in 10 years. I think that billions of people will be displaced. I think that there will be food shortages, water shortages, bans, rationing, and just generally quite horrific hazards and natural anthropogenic disasters happening. I think that countries will accelerate the efforts that they're making to mitigate their impact, but mitigation will see a sort of result 50 years down the line or 100 years down the line, not 10 years down the line. And I think that countries who are feeling the impacts will continue to push for more adaptation funding, which most of the West will push back on. And the reason I say that is that because in the previous COP, we saw an absolutely revolutionary adaptation fund come, mainly pushed through by developing countries and countries which were feeling the impacts of the climate crisis. And the entire West decided that COP was a failure. And it's just like, are you joking? Like, these people have just got something that's going to help them deal with these impacts. And just because it's not about us, we're suddenly complaining that it's a failure. So I really fundamentally think we need to change that mindset. Both sides need work, but one of those things is happening right now, and the other thing is like a question for like 100 years down the line. That's certainly not to say we need to delay action. So that's all the negative stuff. The hope within that is that I think there are some really fantastic initiatives happening, not just from government, but like, I mean, just like grassroots business, community-led startups. Like I work, so alongside being a founder and ex-Greenpeace and sort of my academic stuff, I'm also a climate tech advisor on 2 accelerators, and I see just like some really fantastic, phenomenal ideas coming through. And Canopey itself is on Techstars Paris Sustainability Accelerator, and like we're on a cohort with like 10 other just like brilliant companies that are really going to change the world. So it's like there's so much positive stuff that's coming through. The reason I didn't start with that is just because I'm wary that if we give too much hope, then we become complacent on like the seriousness and the gravitas of that climate situation. Because also we talk about climate like climate crisis, but this is a planetary crisis. Like every single planetary boundary is a threat, and we don't talk about that enough. I would really recommend people looking up Rockstrom's planetary crisis talk. Like it's incredible and really, really detailed about what I mean by that. I'm not going to go into it now, but yeah, really important for us to not just talk about carbon emissions or like climates, because it's a very small piece of a much larger puzzle. And once one of those things breaks, everything sort of just like tipping points just like goes. We really need to talk about that more. And then finally, I think like where I'd like to see it go, I'd like to see government backtrack on its ridiculous own backtracking. Every single climate advisory board that I sit on, every single organization that I work with, I am part of a COP28 organization group chat on WhatsApp. And as soon as the UK government backtracked on all of this stuff, there was a letter from some of the leading business representatives, leading government representatives from around the world, hundreds of people signing, saying that they disagreed with that, which is incredibly positive, because it means that the government might think that it has a mandate to do all of these things, but the business community and the societal community adamantly and unequivocally said you do not have a mandate to change these things. So I'm really positive about that, because I think that will mean we'll see a change. And I actually think the next election we're going to see, I don't think the Tories will leave, but I think that there will be pressure for them to care a bit more about climate and bring that up in the agenda. And where I'd like us to get to is, therefore, because of that, I'd like to see regulation come in harder on what companies can and can't do, what they can and can't say. I'd like to see more funding. We have seen a great increase and then a slight drop in climate tech funding. And I think that we need to see more funding generally. Like we need trillions, not billions, to go into this sector. And I think we will get there. But again, that conversation needs to speed up. And I think that really the really only big glimmer of, or big shining hope, is that people care more. You can talk to anyone and they won't disagree generally. There might be a fringe group that disagree, but generally people agree that this is something which needs to quite drastically shift, because we all understand that this is going to impact not just people in the global south, but also us at some point as well. So as ever, we're super selfish people and we only care as soon as it hits us. So now that people understand that and have started seeing that, I think that actually will lead to much larger collective and grassroots action as well. And I think that in 10 years, I would like to see less demonization of climate groups like activists. As much as it's frustrating, that you can't get to work, I can guarantee you that it's going to be more frustrating if the city is burning. So so I think, like, let's put it into context and stop crying and actually join those people in shouting for change.
That was a really great answer.
So yeah, best answer we've had.
Sorry about the doom to begin with, though.
It was it was a journey. It was like emotional, sad, change,
I feel
inspiration. Yeah. Take action.
I think I just wish that more people, you can have that open conversation, and it's just like common, It's like talking about the cost of living crisis, talking about the climate crisis, because so often I just find that people's eyes glaze over and they're kind of like, anyway, and I'm like, it's so like demoralizing, isn't it? So I feel like if we can get to the point where not that I mean, I do worry that people will then start to panic and they'll go out and buy toilet roll again, and I won't be able to get any toilet roll. But
I think this is this
is what people do, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think it's how we talk about it, right? Like if we go into that conversation with people and we're like, oh, the climate crisis, like, oh my God, this big intangible thing. Like, of course, everyone's just going to be, oh, piss off, mate. Like, I don't want to hear about it. But if you can go into it and be like,
maybe that's my mistake.
But no, I get it, because I've spent like 10 years talking that way. But I think that the shift is that we can go into that being like, first and foremost, did you see this fantastic initiative that's happening, which is saving all of this stuff and like doing these amazing things run by these amazing people, and like they're solving this big problem. So the problem is there. We're talking about the problem, and we're talking about the solutions that are coming out for it. And then we can talk about, well, we need more people to get behind that solution. And actually, that can be a very short conversation starter, whereby it starts positively, but it's still accepting that we're in the shit. And then that is much more likely to get a positive response than just starting with the shit and then going, solution? Like, you know, we need to not blind ourselves with hope, but definitely talk more positively about and get people on board with that positivity. You know, people turn off with negative things. Like, it's understandable. Like, no one wants to be depressed, but it is a very, very serious situation. So talk about the positive things that are happening within that, solving the gravitas of that problem. So you're still touching on it, but in a different way.
I'll work on that. Thank you.
Stop being so negative, Ellie.
I am.
We're all working on it. Okay. No, thanks, guys.
Cool. I guess that's a wrap then.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. We hope it was truly
Earth your while.
For more information, visit reuserbox.co.uk/earthyourwhile.
And if you'd like to appear on the next series of Earth Your While, please email media@reuserbox.co.uk.